Hello chess friends! After losing 2 games in a row in the ongoing Tata Steel Masters Tournament, Magnus Carlsen is back with a courageous victory over Richard Rapports in which he achieves a winning position by move 19, although it requires him to weather a very dangerous attack, during which he makes one of the most courageous moves that I have ever seen. You are not going to want to miss this, so without any further ado, let's get right into this game. Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces begins the game with e4. We have e5 from Richard Rapports, knight to f3, and now knight to f6, the Petrov defense, which has a reputation for being a bit drawish. Magnus Carlsen plays the most popular move here, knight takes e5, and after d6, giving the knight a kick, he plays a very unusual move, knight to d3. Far more common to go to f3, because on d3, you're blocking one of your central pawns, not something you normally want to do in the opening. But after Rapport takes on e4, we have queen to e2, attacking and pinning, so queen to e7 is necessary, defending the knight, breaking the pin so that the knight's free to move, and now we see the point of Carlsen's move knight to d3. He has this nice f4 square. That's a nice outpost, which that knight cannot be booted off so easily, unless black wants to play g5, but weakening the king side like that so early in the game might not be the best idea. And this move comes with a threat, knight to d5, hitting the black queen, which will not be able to maintain defense of both the knight on e4 and the pawn on c7, which will be hit by that knight, threatening a fork. So Rapport wisely prevents the move knight d5 by controlling that square with the c6 pawn. Carlsen plays f3, kicking the knight out of the center. It goes to f6, after which it looks like the game could be headed for a draw. You only have the one open file. It looks very likely that the queens are going to be traded. However, neither side is going to be very eager to be the one to initiate the queen trade, as that would just help their opponent develop. You know, if Carlsen here were to take the queen, then bishop takes e7, black has a bishop developed. So he plays d4, controlling the center, opening up the diagonal for his dark squared bishop, and now bishop to f5 from Rapport, with a threat to win the pawn on c2, since that queen is not defending, being pinned to the king still. Carlsen plays c4, getting the pawn out of danger with more central control. Rapport responds with h5, preventing his bishop from being kicked around with the move g4. It's a good move. Carlsen plays knight to c3, developing. Rapport plays knight to a6. It's often not a good idea to place your knight on the rim of the board, where it is said to be grim, unless you have a good reason for it, which Rapport does here. He's threatening to come into b4, after which he would be threatening a check and a fork. And if Carlsen were to prevent that with a3, then the knight could just drop to c7, with some nice central control, supporting a possible d5 advance. So this is not a bad way to get the knight into the game. Now, as I mentioned, a3 would be a fine move here, to stop knight to b4, but Carlsen has no fear of that move. He plays king to f2. It addresses the threat of knight to c2. After Rapport's next move, knight to b4, if knight to c2 is played, it no longer comes with check, meaning black will not pick up that rook. Of course, he will pick up the d4 pawn, which is why Carlsen played queen d1 next. This defends d4 and also defends the d3 square, so that if black played knight c2 here, bishop d3 would be possible. And you might think, wait a minute, what about this rook on a1? After bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, knight takes a1? Well, not so fast, because there's the little problem of rook to e1, pinning the queen to the king, and that queen cannot be saved. So Rapport does not go for this line. He just castles, so that if the same variation happens and the rook gets to e1, the queen will not be pinned to the king. So knight c2 is again a concern, which is why Carlsen played knight to d3, blocking the bishop's access to c2. Rapport responds with d5, striking in the center. It's a good move. The pawn is well supported by the two knights. If white were to take on d5, after knight b takes d5, he would be positionally lost, allowing black this beautifully placed knight in the center of the board, protected by a knight, and he'd have this weak, isolated d-pawn. So instead, Carlsen pushes forward with c5, which is the best move, blocking the queen's defense of the knight on b4, so that knight takes b4 is a threat. So Rapport takes on d3. But this was not the most accurate move. Better was to take with the bishop, and very shortly I will show you why. After bishop takes d3, in this position Rapport realized that Magnus Carlsen's attack on the queen side is coming more quickly than his attack on the king side. Carlsen can play b4, b5 very quickly. He has rook to e1 with tempo on the queen. Carlsen is covering the g5 square, so black will have to prepare the move g5. He can't play it right away. So Rapport realizes that if both players just attack on opposite wings towards each other's kings, that's a race that he's going to lose. So he decides to get tricky. He sacrifices a piece. Knight to e4 check. Now this is the best move in the position, but it would have been much better if there was no bishop on f5 and there was a knight on b4 instead. And the reason is, after Carlsen plays f takes e4, if this bishop was not here, then queen to f6 would come with check, meaning Rapport could pick up this d pawn with the queen, and the white center begins to collapse. The engine says that would be about an equal position. But since queen f6 is not coming with check here, Carlsen could just play e5, and he'd be winning. So what's played is d takes e4, with an attack on the bishop, and he's grabbed one pawn for his sacrificed piece. Okay, bishop drops back to e2. Now queen to f6, attacks d4, but it's not with check, so here Carlsen has the opportunity to defend with bishop to e3. However, Rapport does get to grab a second pawn for his piece with this move bishop takes c5, taking advantage of the fact that the pawn is pinned to the queen. And now the d4 pawn is attacked by 3 pieces. Carlsen has no good way to save that pawn. He plays the best move, rook to f1, undoubtedly anticipating that Rapport will grab his third pawn for the sacrificed piece. And after bishop takes d4, best would be rook takes d4, after which the engine thinks white is better, but black does have a fighting chance. But really quickly, I want to show you the key line that demonstrates why rook f1 was necessary. If instead of taking on d4 with the rook, black were to play e3 check, king g1, and then take with the rook, the white queen does not have a lot of squares available and would love to go to the b3 square, which is the only active post, and here bishop e6 would be losing for white if this rook was not on f1. If it was on h1 instead, there'd be the dual threats of taking the queen and the checkmate on f2. So just a little demonstration of why rook to f1 is a good move, and it just makes sense putting the rook opposite the black queen. But in this position, Rapport does not play the best move, bishop takes d4. He blunders with queen to h4 check. And after this move 19, he has a completely lost position. I don't know what exactly he missed here, but Carlsen played king to g1, and now there is bishop d6, threatening checkmate in 2, queen takes h2 check, followed by bishop to g3. But Carlsen is able to answer this threat of checkmate by taking the bishop on f5, grabbing a second piece and opening up this f1 square for his king, so that after queen takes h2 check, he does not have to go to f2, where he will be vulnerable by the check from the bishop. He can go to f1. Rapport plays queen to h1 check, and at this point, was he expecting king to f2 and a possible perpetual check with queen to h4 check? If he was, he would have had to have missed this move that Carlsen played, bishop to g1. Perhaps that's what he missed back when he played queen to h4 check? I don't know. Now he's just 2 pieces down, but he still has some attacking moves. He plays g6, hitting Carlsen's rook, and here Carlsen makes what is one of the most courageous moves I've ever seen in my life. He rejects the safest option, rook to a5, after which white would be attacking 2 pawns, the pawn on a7 and the pawn on e4 with the knight, and he says, I'm going to take on f7 instead, opening the f-file to his king and inviting Rapport to play rook h to f8, which he does. And Carlsen should not take that rook, because after rook takes f8 check, rook takes f8, black is getting one of his pieces back after king e1, queen to g1 check, king d2, and then the pawn on d4. Not a good idea. But Carlsen sees that he can defend the rook with bishop to c4, and he'll just be able to maintain his piece on f7. He's not afraid. At the right moment, queen to b3 can add further defense. So will Carlsen be able to maintain his 2-piece advantage? Well, there is the move bishop h2, which is what Rapport plays next, attacking the pinned bishop with 2 pieces, but Carlsen plays king to f2, defending the bishop with the queen and the king now, also keeping defense of g2, which is why the king did not move to e2. Now we have rook takes f7 check, bishop takes f7, rook to f8, pinning and attacking the f7 bishop, but Carlsen has queen b3. And it looks like Rapport is completely busted here. This queen is shut out of the game for a moment, but it may not be as hopeless as it appears, because Rapport does have a way to get one of his pieces back. After bishop takes g1 check, rook takes g1, queen to h4 check. Carlsen has no way to avoid a perpetual check without allowing the black queen to get to f4 with check, which will pick up the bishop. So here's what happened. King to e2, queen g4 check, and if you want to avoid a perpetual check, you're going to have to move to one of these squares where the queen can move to f4 with check, which is what happens here. The king goes to d1, It's necessary to get off this rank. If you were to move to c2 instead, then queen to f2 check would pick up the rook. So now Rapport picks up the bishop on f7. But now that the smoke is cleared a bit, we see that he's only got the 2 pawns for Carlsen's extra piece. And it's not going to be enough. Carlsen plays a good move, knight to e2, defending the rook, defending a pawn, attacking the queen, which moves to f5, allowing Carlsen to force a trade of queens by pinning the black queen to the king. Rapport captures on h3, g takes h3, and now rook to f3, attacking the pawn. Carlsen defends that pawn with the most active move, rook to g3, inviting a trade of rooks while keeping an eye on the g6 pawn. And at this point, Rapport resigns. He knows that there's no hope. Trading rooks will of course result in a dead loss position. After the knight recaptures, this pawn's hit. Carlsen's going to round up that pawn, and then Rapport's 1 extra pawn for the piece offers no hope at all. He could instead drop the rook back to f6 and defend, but then after king d2, Carlsen's king is a lot more active. This pawn is going to get rounded up. King e3 is coming. And that's all she wrote. So a very nice comeback game for Carlsen, having absolute faith in his calculating abilities by heading right into a dangerous line, having foreseen the winning endgame that will result after all the smoke clears. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. Please subscribe to the channel for more quality analysis like this coming your way soon, and I'll see you on the next one.